Hey guys, what's going on? James here. I'm joined by Evan Wanders of the Cannon Fire Podcast, BucsNation.com. Evan, the first thing that we are going to be talking about today is the absolute collapse the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had at the end of their matchup in Thursday night against the Atlanta Falcons. We're not going to talk about overtime. We'll talk about that in a separate video. But we are going to be talking about the final offensive sequence for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because a lot of people are pinning the final two drives offensively as the biggest reason as to why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost this game. And I want to get your thoughts and opinions on it because in these two drives, this is the situation that we saw happen. I've got it pulled up here on my screen. It was the first drive that happened was towards the end of the game. It was, hold on just a moment, with 6.5 minutes left in the ballgame. The Buccaneers had a 1st and 10 from their own 44. They have a couple of plays. Bucky Irving gets a first down with 5 minutes 4 seconds left, or I guess a first down or 5-yard run at 1st and 10 at Atlanta's 43-yard line. 4 minutes 25 seconds left. Bucky Irving gets a catch for 3 yards. Then 3rd and 2 at Atlanta's 35. 3.5 minutes left. Rachaad White gets 3 yards for the first down. Okay. This is the first miscue that happens. It's 1st and 10 from Atlanta's 32-yard line. 2 minutes 55 seconds left. Bucky Irving runs 7 yards, fumbles, forced fumble by Jesse Bates, recovered by Caden Ellis at Atlanta's 25-yard line. What were your initial thoughts whenever you saw that play, that drive happen with the Bucky Irving fumble? Do you feel like it is as big of a contributor to this loss as other people feel?
Well, the big thing is, I think when you're looking at it, it would have done two things. One, I think it would have put obviously the Buccaneers in much better range for a field goal, right? Obviously, they would have been almost the chip shot territory for Chase McLaughlin. But also, I think Atlanta might have had a decision to make, right, on whether or not to start using their timeouts because the Buccaneers were doing a great job of running the clock down. So 2:55, Bucky Irving doesn't fumble. The clock goes almost all the way down to the 2-minute warning. The Bucs run another play, and also like Irving got 7 yards. If he doesn't fumble, he might have gotten a little bit more. He might have gotten a first down there, actually. So if he gets the first down, then it's really critical for Atlanta. So I wouldn't say it was the play, but it definitely is one of the top plays here that resulted in what it resulted in, unfortunately.
You then get to the next drive, and look, this is why the Bucky Irving thing doesn't feel as bad. It's not a
Yeah.
great play, by the way, right? It's not a great play,
It can't
but
happen in that situation either. Just can't happen.
I agree. He is a rookie. I think this is a good experience for him to have as a young player. But the Buccaneers get a break defensively. You get a 1st and 10 for the Falcons at their own 25-yard line. They still have all of their timeouts at this point. A -2-yard run, a sack by Logan Hall, his best game ever as a Buck, by the way. He looked fantastic. A 4-yard completion to Tyler Algier. 2-minute warning. Kirk Cousins throws an interception to Levante David. He goes all the way to Atlanta's 28-yard line. Okay? Then, the next drive for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Rachaad White loses 3 yards on a first down run. Timeout by Atlanta. The next play, Bucky Irving runs for 7 yards. He doesn't fumble this time. However, there are two things that happen on this play. One is Graham Barton gets a holding that knocks the Buccaneers 10 yards back to the Atlanta's 41-yard line. The second thing was the lack of a no call of a face mask on Bucky Irving from Caden Ellis. Okay? That takes you back to a 2nd and 23 from Atlanta's 41. It is a -2-yard completion to Rachaad White. Atlanta takes their second timeout. Bucky Irving rushes for 1 yard. Atlanta takes their third timeout. Trenton Gill punts for a touchback. Atlanta gets it on their 1st and 10 at Atlanta's 20-yard line. We know what happens after that. We'll talk about that in a separate video. What are your thoughts and opinions about that last drive there offensively for the Bucs?
One way to mismanage a football game, I should say. Look, should the face mask have been called? Yes. It should have been called. Had it been called, I believe it would have been offsetting penalties. So instead of it being 2nd and 23 and the Buccaneers backed up basically out of field goal range, the Bucs would have still been in field goal range, still would have had that 2nd and long, still would have had that 2nd and 13, but would have been in field goal range still for Chase McLaughlin. A field goal makes it a 6 point game. The Falcons would have needed a touchdown to take the lead. A field goal would have done them no good. And as we saw with them only having 1 second left in the field goal, that mattered. But again, it was just too conservative, I think, too predictable at times. And again, a way to this is football 101 on how to not manage your final drive here. And the Buccaneers paid for it. They really did. They got too conservative, took their foot off the gas. And I'm not saying you have to chuck the ball 50 yards down the field or whatever. I'm not saying that. But I think you need to find more creative ways to get the ball in your playmakers' hands, get yards. I mean, even when it's 2nd and 23, okay, you get backed up. You have 2 plays there to gain. You gain 5 yards on the 2nd and 23. You gain 6 yards on the third and whatever. All of a sudden, that's 11 more yards. That's a manageable field. You can kick that field goal still, right? You can make that a 6 point game. All you need to do is get some yards. And the Buccaneers just weren't able to do it. They kept going backwards. And Atlanta having all 3 timeouts was critical because it ran off about 30 seconds of game clock. So it was a really, really, really critical drive and one that I think the Buccaneers are going to be kicking themselves for at least for the next week. Because unfortunately, the good thing is they have the mini bye week, right? They have the 10-day break. But the bad thing is they have to sit with this for a 10-day break. So definitely one to forget for the Buccaneers offense down the stretch.
Now, do you feel like that this is something that makes you look a little bit deeper and go, ooh, like a loss like this, a collapse like this, right? Because look, this game was not even arguably, it was bigger than the Philadelphia Eagles game. Atlanta
Mhm.
has now beaten the Bucs and the Saints back-to-back weeks in the NFC South. They're far and away first place, and right now I would even say they're probably favorites to win the South right now. For the Bucs going forward, based on how this collapse happened, especially in a divisional game at that, a must win, are you worried about the management of this team, the way all of this kind of transpired at the end here? Or do you feel like this is a situation where, hey, the Bucs just kind of had a collapse here. This is not the identity of this football team.
I am a little bit concerned. I will say I'm not, full blown panic yet, but I also think we're going to find out, right? I think you saw a team, and I had mentioned this on the Campfire podcast, the game review show. I think you saw a team that 4 days ago played in 110-degree heat, right? I think you saw a defense that was just simply gassed, right? I think you saw a team that's played a lot of football in the first 5 weeks and has had a lot of injuries. Now, that's not an exact excuse. That is not the exact reason why they lost, right? They lost because of many other reasons, but. Uh, the reason I am concerned is because when you look at the schedule, right, you have at New Orleans, then you have versus Baltimore, versus Atlanta, at Kansas City, versus San Francisco. Then you have your bye week. And yes, the schedule gets lighter down the stretch after that bye week, but it's not going to matter as much if you're 3-7, like at the bye week. So this game against New Orleans now becomes much more critical, right? And I think that's the concerning part where you had a chance here to really put a stranglehold on this division, right? Go to 4-1 in this division, drop the Falcons at 2-3, assuming the Saints lose to the Chiefs, which hey, anything can happen. But if the Saints lost to the Chiefs, they would have been 2-3 as well. You would have been 2 games up on everybody in the NFC South. And now instead, the Falcons have the tiebreaker. And I bet you just said the Falcons are the favorites to win the NFC South. I bet you if the Buccaneers would have won this game, your statement would be the exact opposite right now. I think that's how big this game was. And I think the loss isn't the frustrating part. You lost a football game, whatever. It's the way you lost. It's that you had this one basically and you gave it away.
It's not just the way they lost, but it's who they lost to.
Hmm.
Again, you lost to a division rival, right?
Hmm.
You are hoping you can beat Atlanta in your home stadium
Yeah.
now in a couple of weeks, because if
You're,
you
you're you're
don't,
not you're not winning the South if you get swept by Atlanta. You're just not.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. Look, if this was the Giants, it's still a frustrating, or a non-division team, right? Still a very frustrating loss. But Atlanta now has deep control in the South. They have 2 division wins right now. Two. The Saints and the Bucs are 0-1 in the division right now. That's not great. That is not great. At best, you hope that the Bucs can beat Atlanta in Tampa now, and the Saints can also beat Atlanta, because we're going to assume that the Falcons are probably going to sweep the Panthers, right?
Yeah.
This was a monumental win for the Falcons, and the Bucs, again, it's not just how they lost, but it's also so important to say who they lost to, right? This was a very, very important game, and they collapsed at the end of it. And look, is it just Bucky Irving's fault? No. Is it just that final offensive drive? No. Is it just the defense's fault? No. We'll talk about that in a separate video. But just collapsing this way is not good. And I agree with you where it's like, man, a bad loss like this to a division rival, it's like you will be a smidge worried going forward, right? This team has a lot to prove. I would argue they have just as much, if not more, to prove coming out of this game than they did the Broncos game.
Yes.
So we're going to see how they respond after just this utter collapse that they had. And the next couple of weeks are even more important now. That game against the Saints and that game against the Falcons,
you have to win both,
are dangerously important, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
Dangerously important. I don't even care about the Baltimore game now in the immediate reaction. Yeah. You think about New Orleans in New Orleans, and you think about Atlanta in Tampa Bay. You need to win those games after a collapse like this, and Evan, we'll see if they are going to do so. But folks, let us know your thoughts and opinions about this collapse down in the comment section below. I would love to hear it. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Go check out Evan's work over at the Cannon Fire podcast and over at BucsNation.com. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. As always, we'll see you all in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.